3 decades ago, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers captured my imagination. Like many of my fellow 90s kids, I watched after school, joined the official fan club, and of course, collected the toys. Eventually, I put those toys away, but the flame of my Power Rangers fandom never died. Now, in this milestone 30th anniversary year, I am re-examining the show, its legacy, and the tale of its most legendary ranger across media. It's time to get back to action. Welcome to Summoning the Zords, a Power Rangers fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss a Ranger Catastrophe, changing of the Zords, and a different shade of pink is my buddy Zach Woliner. Welcome to the show there, Zach Attack.
Hey, thank you for having me, Anthony. I'm real excited.
Oh, my pleasure. You know, we've known each other for many years, and I know that our shared love of the Power Rangers franchise is something that has been part of our friendship. We've talked about it a lot. And the Pink Ranger, Amy Jo Johnson in particular, Kimberly Hart, I know she's been a favorite of yours. So when I got to this point in my rewatch of the original Mighty Morphin seasons, you felt like the guy. You felt like the guy for this.
Yeah, I
What is
appreciate it.
when we talk about our Power Rangers fan journeys? Where did this start for you? Were you watching from the beginning of Mighty Morphin?
Yeah, we started at the beginning. I mean, at that time, I'm a few years older than you. I was, 11. I was born in 1982, but I have, my younger brother Harry. There's a 7-year age difference there. So I always feel, along with my older brother Jason, who's 2 years older than me, 9 years older than Harry, we kind of kept him ahead of the game with stuff. He was like a little wise beyond his years. But then for me, at least in our bond, in our relationship, he kind of kept me young. He kind of, we shared interests and, watched shows together and stuff. So I think, even though at 11, you're probably more like at the tail end of like the demographic, fan age for Power Rangers, because you're pretty close to being a teenager, and I don't think typical teenage. Not that I was typical, I know, always a weirdo, but so it was something to bond with. Like we watched Pokemon together before we would go to school and stuff like that. All sorts of shows and common interests we shared, me and Harry. So I think that's part of what kept me into it, and I enjoyed it just on its own. Like I said, I was yeah, even at 11, I was not caring about whether I liked cartoons or shows like Power Rangers. People judged me all the time back then. I was always picked on. You being a nerd. Back then, that's what it is. Now nerds are the king of the hill with Marvel movies, and now Super Mario is like getting huge. Things that we liked from the get go are huge now, and so now it's like we kind of won a little bit, for better or worse. But so yeah, we started at the beginning, and I remember enjoying the show back then. Um, so I watched all the first season. I don't know about all the second, because was the change of cast within the second, or was it at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the second?
It was,
So
I would say,
yeah,
about midway through season 2.
okay, because yeah, that's typically a big thing for me. I kind of get attached a little. Like I kind of dropped off. I mean, I remember watching some episodes with Rocky, Adam, and Aisha. Like one sticks in my mind is like Rocky gets like addicted to pachinko or something like that. Is that one of them
Okay.
playing? There's like it's like a game. It's like in the juice bar, and and then I guess it's turned into a monster or something. That's one that sticks out in my mind. So I did stick around a little bit and saw some other stuff, but then it kind of fizzled out. I know I saw Turbo. I can't remember if I saw Turbo in theaters. I feel like I must have, because I remember, hearing the song at the time and singing along with it. I don't know. I don't think I saw the first one in theaters. I don't know when I first saw it. It might have been a bootleg. My mom bought a bootleg at one point that I remember watching, and like
Well,
you see
join the
people.
club.
Yeah,
You're
I heard you. You mentioned that on a previous episode. I'm like, wow, what are the odds? We have people walking in front of the camera and laughter and stuff. So that's a funny coincidence. But
yeah.
yeah, so I did watch Turbo in the theaters, and it was like, and then that was one time Amy Jo Johnson came back, so that was kind of cool. Her and Austin St. John. Um,
But as far as these episodes in particular, Kimberly's departure from the show, so you've
Yeah,
kind of
these
fallen off, but you came back. Were you back for these when they
no, no,
aired?
these are all brand new to me. So I didn't really watch any of like the rest of Mighty Morphin. I didn't watch Zeo, or the Alien Rangers or any of that stuff. Turbo movie, maybe I think I watched some of Turbo in like the follow up from the movie. But again, that didn't last long. Everything after that, I'm pretty sure I checked out again. But yeah, Mighty Morphin it still has a place, in my, I have fond memories of it as like a property from, not, necessarily my youth as a little kid, but, my youth in that age range. And, I always think about all the different interests I've had over the years. And some, they wax and wane. So like I might forget about Power Rangers, and not think about it all. And then like Star Wars movies come out, and then I'm back in Star Wars, where that was kind of, downplayed for a while, but then, oh, no, it was a new movie. So actually now doing this podcast, it's like re-energize my interest, and I kind of want to go back and watch more. I did introduce it to my daughter Penny, uh, probably a few years back now. And I try to get her to watch shows with me because I have like a DVD cabinet full of movies, and especially season box sets, and some of them are still in the wrapping from years and years past because I just didn't have a reason to justify sitting and watching. I'm not going to just open up and sit and stare at it by myself. I needed someone to watch it to. So I probably did some of that with my wife, Veronica, after we were married and living together. But, a lot of the stuff she's not especially interested in. So when I had a kid, I thought that was a good opportunity. And we did watch some, but, she kind of lost interest. I tried to show her the X-Men cartoon from the 90s too, which is like that same era as Mighty Morphin, Fox Kids and all that. And, other things here and there. But, she never got so far into them yet, but I'm always trying to get her to come back to it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
why do you think I do this podcast? It's like, my son's not quite old enough yet. And not that there's anything wrong with spending free time rewatching Power Rangers, but just the way I'm wired at this point, it's like if I'm not making a project out of it, it's hard. It's hard to to carve out that time and kind of make myself do it. But this has provided the perfect vehicle, like a shark cycle, which we'll get to,
yeah, those were new to me. I'm pretty sure.
to do this. So it's been a blast. It's funny, you watched less of the show and the franchise than I had thought. I mean, but I'm still glad to have you here, especially knowing your fandom of Amy Jo Johnson in particular. And I know you've continued to follow her career. She's gone on to be a director. She's directed Superman and Lois, which is a favorite show.
Yeah,
of
I was
mine.
gonna bring up. Yeah, today is right now this is a big day. I mean, we're recording this on the 85th anniversary of Superman, so that's big, obviously, in your world with how much Superman means to you. And then we're doing the Amy Jo Johnson centric Power Ranger podcast, and the worlds collide when she directed an episode of the current Superman show.
Absolutely. Kind of on that note, speaking of when we're doing this, so we are recording this literally the day before the Once and Always special drops on Netflix, but I'm going to have an episode on Once and Always out before this one. So it'll be interesting because as of now, right, it seems pretty clear that Amy Jo Johnson is not involved in any capacity with Once and Always. But at the same time, you never know. So this thing might drop and there might be some sort of little surprise, something, I don't know. Obviously, people will have already heard us talk about it if it happened. But what you're hearing now is recorded right before Once and Always. And yeah, I think, again, the other big reason I'm doing this podcast now, 30 years of the franchise, this reunion special, it just, and of course, sadly, the passing of Jason David Frank as well, but it's just, a lot of things kind of coming together, making you think back on the franchise and wanting to go back and watch. And it's been an absolute delight. What's especially fascinating about these episodes that we watched is you talk about like a tale of two transitions. So we did a whole episode on the introduction of Rocky, Adam, and Aisha and the power transfer. We talked all about how difficult that was, like an almost impossible behind the scenes situation where half your cast walks off, right, in the salary dispute, and you now have to arc out their characters without having the actors there. And we talked about how they did it with the recycled footage and the morphed scenes and all of that. And now, what a change of pace, because here we have this 9-episode swing, if you include Follow That Cab, which was this one-off that was kind of sandwiched in between a couple of the multi-part arcs.
Yeah, I watched that one too.
Me too. Yeah. Okay, good. So we can touch on that.
Sorry,
too.
I didn't want to interrupt, but I was going to say, I just felt like, let me see what this one is. It's sort of like a palate cleanser, kind of.
Yes. Yeah, just like a little one-off in the midst of all these multi-parters. So when you take it all together, it's this 9-episode swing that introduces Kat Hillard, played by Catherine Sutherland, who will go on to become the new Pink Ranger, and arcs out Amy Jo Johnson's Kimberly Hart. And so, unlike when Jason, Zach, and Trini left, here you saw the seeds being planted, right, of the Pan Global Games and this world-renowned gymnastics coach who's going to train Kimberly. And it really just builds. And it was such a departure from what we had seen before. And what I realized is that, especially in this era of the show, where we did have numerous changes over the 3 seasons of Mighty Morphin, Zeo, and then even Turbo, when, Tommy and Adam and Kat and Tanya, they eventually leave. This is, I think it's fair to say, the only instance where you have truly a meaningful build to a farewell. I mean, we talked about Jason, Zach, and Trini. Aisha leaves pretty abruptly right before Zeo starts. David Yost, unfortunately, we know the horrible behind-the-scenes situation that he was dealing with, so the way Billy is dealt with is very unsatisfactory. And then, again, I haven't watched those passing the torch episodes of Turbo, though I've watched clips online. But from what I understand, it was a 2-part episode. But even that, from what I've gathered from reading comments and things like that, I think that felt kind of abrupt to fans at the time. So this was a true farewell arc.
Yeah, it was definitely nice to see it play that out, especially, obviously she's my, favorite Ranger of the show. So to see her get that proper, full storyline and arc and proper goodbye. Like I told you before we recorded, I watched the last episode last night, and at the end of it, I was getting genuinely emotional, and I did not expect that as someone who's close to being 41 years old, maybe will be by the time this thing airs, and who has been mostly detached from the franchise for a large part for a long time, to reconnect with it and watch the whole thing play out and then see the final scene and how they did it. I mean, people joke about the show, people put down the show, they talk about it, the American stuff, it's cheesy and goofy stuff, and that, you could tell when the Japanese footage is used and all that. But there's some good writing in there. There's some real heart, and not to play on words, Kimberly Hart, but I thought it was handled really well, and obviously we'll get there when we get there. But it was definitely satisfying that at least she got to have a proper send-off.
Listen, I agree. And I know I say this every episode, but more and more I've just come to appreciate what these writers were able to accomplish. I mean, hey, look, they were writing this for a young audience, us as kids, and it worked, right? It forged the deep connection that we watch it now and we're pulled right back in. But also, like I always say, the fact that they were working around this other footage. I mean, it's one thing, and I'm not saying it's easy to come up with a wholly original story. That's its own challenge. But to have to fit a story around, you know, 15 minutes of footage that you already have. I mean, that's hard. So I give them a lot of credit for that. And in these episodes in particular, and again, we'll get more specific, but they put the Rangers in a couple of what I thought were interesting ethical dilemmas, gave us a couple things we hadn't seen. I mean, we have a hand-to-hand fight between Zed and Tommy. I mean, there's some really cool stuff in there. And especially with Kat in particular, you see this really interesting parallel, I think, to the way Tommy was introduced on the show. But in this arc, and audience might remember when we talked about Green with Evil, it's an iconic arc. I love it. It was fun to revisit. But there were a few things where I was like, oh man, I wish they had done this. I wish they had done that. And they did it here in this Cat arc. There was some really good stuff in these episodes, like legitimately good.
Yeah,
You know?
I definitely agree. It was fun to watch, and it was fun to take notes as I did it, because I kept like coming up with things and thoughts and be like, hmm, okay, what's that about? And, almost, sometimes making little jokes about stuff that happens and stuff. And
So
yeah.
one last big picture question, I guess, before we talk more specifically about these 9 episodes. And we did also take a look at that Boom Studios Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Pink miniseries, which is really interesting because you get to follow Kim after she leaves the show, and that we can talk about that too. But so why was and is the Pink Ranger Kimberly Hart your favorite?
Well, I mean, I hate to sound like, it's shallow or surface level, but I mean, Amy Jo Johnson was always easy on the eyes, I'll say. I don't know if I'd call it like a crush. Like, again, like I was, not a little kid, but I liked her. I mean, I liked her acting too. I'm not saying she's just, someone who's good looking, and obviously, where she's gone in her career since then. She's obviously very talented in several different ways. I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say she probably had the best post-Ranger career. I mean, I don't know if you think anyone else might be,
No, I would.
you know,
Well, unless if we're talking Johnny Young Bosch and his voice acting career, that might
okay,
be in its own category.
okay,
But generally speaking, no, I would agree with that for sure. And here's
yeah,
the thing, and I appreciate you, being respectful and qualifying your answer and all that. I would imagine, I'll say, on behalf of myself, I would imagine a lot of young boys and many young girls as well, like growing up watching that show at a formative age, she was probably a first crush, whether it rose to that level or not, but in that category for a lot of people. I think
no,
that's
yeah.
probably
I mean,
fair to say.
I see that on like posts online and stuff, and they'll be like, "Oh, everyone of the '90s like first crush," and it's a picture of her, and yeah, clearly, I'm sure, you know, she was that girl for that era. She was that girl, and I was 11, prepubescent, so you have those feelings, and but it's not like she was a bad actress, but just pretty. She was pretty, but also gave good performances on it, and then through the Power Rangers, and again, I like the whole original cast. I'm very much someone who, when you get into it at the start and you get to know those characters, you know, I liked all of them, to different degrees. But obviously, then there was this extra level with her. But yeah. So like I was saying, with the change, I kind of fizzled out a little. It's also like another comparison with that would be like Pokemon. They at one point completely got rid of the original voice cast and just replaced them, and it was just like a quick thing like that, some contract thing, and I that's kind of why I stopped watching that too. It's just like I link those voices with those characters just as I link these actors with like they're like the true Power Rangers for me. They're my Power Rangers, and I'm sure everyone watching over the past 30 years had their team, depending on when you got into it. But yeah, so it just obviously that extra that extra thing she had going for her kind of made her stick out more in my mind. this this is funny. When I was 16, I wrote a song about her.
Yeah.
I still have the original handwritten lyric sheet somewhere, and it was this whole like rock anthem to her and her career at that point. And in I think 2003, I was in college. I don't know how he found out, but my older brother Jason found out about her having a gig in New York City performing, because she's also a singer songwriter. Um, so I had to go, and I made it happen. It was at this place called The Bitter End, and I go there, and I got a seat right up at the front of the stage. And she walked out, and like my jaw literally dropped. I was just like in awe, and she saw me, and she's like, "Hi." And I was like, "Hi," and she played, and it was great, and I got to meet her afterwards. I have a picture with her, and I got her first CD, and she signed it. I think it says like "Thanks for the smiles" or something. So it was a really good experience. Actually, well, the part with her was a good experience. There was something not so great about it. I went to see her, and I'm not a drinker, and I don't know about drink minimums at this point. So I'm a college student. Money isn't exactly something I have to spare, and so I didn't know about this and stuff. And sorry,
It's okay. We lost an earbud, but it's back. All good.
yeah. So I didn't know about it, and then I didn't have enough to like cover like what I needed to pay, and like it was a dilemma and stuff. And then I like ended up talking to like the owner or something. He's like, I want you never come back here. you know Pretty serious and scary. And I kind of was trying to negotiate. I'm like, how about I come back? I don't know if it was the very next night or whatever. She had more than one date to perform. I'll come back, I'll pay you what I owe on top of whatever. So I think he agreed to that, because then I did go back. I went the second time. I went with my girlfriend at the time, and so we watched her. They didn't they didn't serve us at all. The waitress was like, "Well, didn't weren't you told not to come back?" And
Jeez.
I tried to explain meekly, "Well, no, there was a thing." And like it's like, "Well, my girlfriend wasn't part of it at the time, but they snubbed both of us." Um, but either way, it was nice. Saw her twice, and then afterwards, I saw her again, and she and like some friends had actually like tooled around with the song that I wrote. So she was telling me they had been sort of messing around musically with my song lyrics. So that was kind of a fun honor.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you
Uh,
gave her the song, so you did. That's awesome, man.
yeah, so I gave her a copy of it. I still have the original. And then actually 2019 New York Comic Con, I saw her again. She was, at a table, and I took Penny with me, and I started singing a little bit of it, and she didn't remember, but also I sang it thinking she'd remember because there was some like contest she had connected to one of her movies where they would do a
Right, right,
screening
right.
in your town. And so in my video I pretended to play the guitar and sang a little bit, so I thought maybe she'd remember the video, not that she'd remember 2003, 16 years later. But even that didn't ring a bell, and I just it was fine. But it was nice seeing her again. And yeah, and so those are my two encounters with her. Well, three, I guess, total. But yeah, it's cool to have met her in person a few times. And yeah, very sweet, very friendly, and very short.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, I've never had the opportunity to meet her. As I've talked about, I mean, I met Cardenas, Johnny Young Bosch, Catherine Sutherland, bumped into David Yost. He was at that convention. In retrospect, I was like, I should have made an
Oh,
effort, or any
I
effort.
didn't know. I didn't know that you didn't fully get to meet him.
No, no, which I regret, but hopefully we'll have another opportunity. But yeah, it's always, it's so far it's been great. You never know, right? When you meet these people whose work you've admired, but really had a lot of fun with those folks. So these episodes that we're looking at, please don't feel like we have to go episode by episode or even arc by arc. We can kind of use that as our general roadmap, but we can kind of look at the arc of these because it really is. And that was one of the other things that I was surprised by. Well, let me say two things I was surprised by. One was how serialized it was. I mean, yes, we have the multi-part stories, but there's a lot. I mean, again, this cat being under the spell of Rita is, runs through most of these episodes that we're talking about. So even when a Ranger Catastrophe ends, right, Cat is still under that spell and infiltrating the Rangers, and they're none the wiser. So I was pleasantly surprised by how serialized it was in that respect. And the other thing, we were talking about this off mic, even though I was still all in on Power Rangers and I was watching these episodes as a kid, I mean, I have next to no memory of these. I remember Kimberly's that final routine on the balance beam and her farewell. I mean, that at least rang some bells. But in in the Follow That Cab episode where Kim, Bulk, and Skull are in a cab that's transformed into a monster, Zordon and Alpha bestow the team with these new shark cycles, and they pop up again in either the next episode or very shortly thereafter. And according to IMDb trivia, I think like that's it. I think they only pop up a couple of times, but they made toys and everything. I had no memory of these, like none. I couldn't tell you why. I mean, I know it was only a couple of episodes, but they did toys, and it's like I probably had them because I was getting all this stuff at the time. I mean, I did you have any recollection of those?
Well, again, I
Oh,
wasn't
that's
watching at
but
this
even just from
point.
the toys or anything like that or
No,
commercials or
I
no.
mean, I don't remember. Again, it was after I was kind of lost my connection to it for a bit.
Yeah. Now I hear you. But so I mean, those were just a couple of big picture things. But so we first meet Kat as literally a cat. Aisha's working at this animal shelter with this vet, and it gives her a little her little side story, and yeah, and she and Kim find this white cat, and it takes a little while, right? But eventually we see the cat morph into Catherine. I mean, I don't know. Initial impressions of Cat, of her introduction. Like, what are you thinking as you're watching this, especially for the first time?
Well, yeah, I did watch these out of order, thinking that changing of the Zords was first, and so then I kind of saw her already established. So, like the first time I'm seeing her, she's like at the juice bar pretending to be friendly, or maybe there's a part of her where when she's not doing the evil stuff, she's a regular girl, but then like things click in her brain, and then she's got to do her evil stuff. But she's just like talking and hanging out with like Tommy and Kim, and then she becomes she really jealous. Like there's a whole jealousy thing in there too. And so yeah, I saw her where she's already established, already under the spell. That's how I first saw her, and then I came back around when I realized I'd skipped Ranger Catastrophe. um So yeah, it's interesting plot device they chose. It's a little on the nose, she's the actress is Cat, the character's Catherine, and she becomes a cat. Like it's,
It, yes, yes, they were not going for subtlety there, but yeah,
and
it
yeah,
works.
at the end then I'm like wondering like now, was it just a cat form created for her, or did she inhabit an existing cat? And if so, what happened to the cat at the end after the spell was broken? It wasn't 100% clear for me because they were having it like a pet. Also, I find it funny, like when it first appears, it's like a stray cat, and just Aisha just scoops it up. No questions asked. Oh, hey, it's a cat. Let me take that cat.
Yeah.
Not the best idea.
So yeah, I mean, let's talk about the plot here and what the villain's plot and how Cat figures into all this because I had some questions as well. For the first couple of episodes, again, not remembering really where this goes, other than Cat's eventually good and becomes the new Pink Ranger. Obviously, I knew that, but for a second, I was doubting myself, and I was like, was she just a cat? And then they like Rita made her into a person, and then afterwards she stays a person. And then you realize, of course, that she was an existing person who Rita put this spell on, and we even see a flashback of how that happened. But
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna mention that. Speaking of also unclear transformations, when you get the flashback and she's remembering her encounter, so she's talking to this guy who's leaning up against a tree, and Rita's hiding in the background. And then, like, also, it split the flashback like into multi parts for some reason. It like shows us the start of it, and then she's back, and then she goes back to the flashback, and a little more is done, and then she's back, and then it's like a third part of the flashback rather than just showing it all at once. But Rita, when she is gonna make her move, she does something to the guy, and he becomes a Tenga warrior, and that left me wondering, was he a Tenga warrior in disguise to lure her in, or was he some random guy she was talking to, and Rita transformed him into a Tenga warrior? This poor innocent bystander.
dude, I had the same thought. I feel like there's an untold story there, right? This poor guy's been trapped in Tenga form. No, I don't know. I think it could go either way. I think it could go
Yeah.
either way. But what I'm wondering is, over these episodes, we see cat as an actual feline, right? And we see her morph. Now, would you ever into Animorphs by any chance? The book series, and there was a television show as well.
I mean, I think I'd seen some of the show, and I'm familiar with like the book covers that shows like the multi-part
Yes.
stages and the transformation.
Not that this transformation was that involved, but that's what it called to mind. And I was big on that book series as a kid. I loved
Oh,
it.
cool.
Right. So right around this time. So just as a side note, as I realized looking back, huge comic book fan, and like even the book series that I read, non-comics, Goosebumps and Animorphs. Like I really liked my multi-part series. Anyway, so we see her as a cat. We see her as Catherine. They transform her into one of the monsters, one of the cat monsters at one point in these episodes too. And I'm saying to myself, Kat, while she's under the spell, gives this backstory about having recently moved to Angel Grove with her family because her dad got transferred for work. And we're not really told anything, at least in these episodes, to contradict that. That seems to be a legit backstory. So what I'm wondering is she going home at any point? And if so, when? Because she's living part of her time as the pet of Kimberly and Aisha. She's spying on the Rangers and reporting back to Rita. But so it's like, what are her parents thinking during this whole time?
That didn't even come to my mind, but yeah, there's so many questions that arise watching it, and I guess to a degree you gotta just suspend disbelief. But it was fun, poking these things out when you see them, because yeah, it's strange some of these things.
Well, the biggest thing, and I'm skipping all the way to the end, but this. It took me a second, and then it clicked, and I said, "Wait a minute." So in a different shade of pink, the Rita and Zed have captured Ninjor. We'll get into why. It's a very convoluted, but it was still cool. I appreciate it. But they've captured Ninjor, right? And they tried, and at this point, the spell has been broken over Cat, and so they are trying to get the Rangers to make this trade, right? Cat for Ninjor, and they have this meeting in the park. And Rita and Zed hand over the jar that Ninjor is allegedly in, and Rocky opens it. He's like, "He's not in here. It's a double cross." Meanwhile, the Rangers, of course, had their own plan to put Kat in this force field to protect her.
Mhm.
And then Kat's eventually taken, and Tommy has to go, or No, Kat rescues herself, right? If I'm remembering correctly, she gives
She
Rio the massage, and yeah,
tricks Rito. Yeah, that was
To-
interesting.
Tommy had gone to rescue Kim previously. In any event, so Kat's rescued. She retrieves Kimberly's power coin, which the bad guys had taken, and then we have the whole transfer of the coin and Kim's farewell and all that. But Ninja are still taken.
Oh my god, they never addressed that, did they? That
Again,
didn't even come to my mind again. I guess because he's a character I was not familiar with before, and when I watched it out of order, like, he shows up, and I'm like, "Who is this guy?" Because they didn't refer to him by name immediately, and I'm like, "There's just this sort of goofy seeming blue guy who's just in this, like, robot suit," and it's like, is he someone in there? Is he a robot? What's his deal? And he's just this sort of cartoonish voice. He sounds kind of like Dudley Do-Right. I know that's probably like a dated reference. It's, if anyone knows Rocky and Bullwinkle, he was a cartoon from those same people way back. I think they made a Brendan Fraser live action adaptation, but even that's decades back now. But it's just like, I was like, what's this guy's deal?
yeah, I mean, we talked about him in the Ninja Quest episode, but yeah, he's the one. He had originally forged the power coins. Then he's the one after the Rangers lose their powers and the Zords are destroyed, where he gives them their new ninja powers and ninja Zords, and he becomes this. I mean, advisor is probably too strong a word, but he's this ally they can call upon. So when they're in battle and the Zords aren't enough, Ninja, I call on you from on high, or something like that, and then he zooms in on his rock, and he can grow, and he has a battle mode. So he's like a sentient Zord. I mean, essentially, I
To
think is
say
the
when they got to it, I was like, wait, so this guy can become a Zord himself? That's new for me. So yeah, but so do you remember at all, like, if after this arc when he next shows up, and do they go like, oh hey, you're back, you managed to get out of that bottle?
I'm not sure. I to give them credit, and again, this was serialized. I'm assuming there is an episode shortly after this where they do rescue him, but it was just funny in the context of this arc, and especially that last three-parter, A Different Shade of Pink, where it's they have. I mean, it's such a huge dilemma for them in the episode, right? Whether or not to trade Cat for Ninja. Cat's like, you
It's
have
like
to
this
do it.
impossible choice. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, Cat's like, you have to do it, and you got to get. And then there's just not a mention of him. And I know, I guess, just like us watching it, I think the characters got caught up in the emotion of Kim's gymnastics performance and routine, and her departure. But it was just kind of funny that so much of this revolved around the trade for Ninjor, and then she's still just. And it was like a
That's
few minutes after the episode was done, and I was like, hey, wait a minute.
Hey, sorry, you weren't the top priority. These girls and their exchange of pink power is what we got to focus on. And Kim's, going ahead with her, competition.
Yeah. But so with Kat, again, the first time we see her is when the cat morphs into Catherine. And, very quickly we see her reporting to Rita and the red eyes. I think they really
Oh
wanted
my
to make
god.
sure
Oh my god.
that the
I was
kids knew.
it If you had a drinking game watching Power Rangers for
You
this
would be
arc,
dead. You would be unconscious at best.
every every time she flashes her red eyes, it reminded me of like when they would do it in the X-Men films, where it was like a sign that, oh wait, that's actually Mystique. She would flash like her yellow eye. But it's really frequent, at least in a few of the episodes. She's always, it's like, just remember, like, this is a sign that she's evil and she's working for Rita. Then at one point the cat flashes the eyes, but they're green. And I would think that would mean like good, as opposed to the red evil eyes. But it's just a flash of the eyes. They just chose green for the color apparently. But oh my god, that was it was pretty funny just how often they felt the need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So, this new character meets the Rangers as the feline who Kimberly and Aisha take in as their house pet, PC for Park Cat. And then also meets them as Catherine, right? This girl from Australia who has just moved there, uh, and of course it's all a plot of Rita's. Side note: I think it's at the beginning of a Ranger Catastrophe when we're on the moon base, and Finster comes in and he's like, "I have an idea, Master," or something like that. And Zed has. This was a line that legit made me laugh out loud. It wasn't like, oh, like that's kind of funny for a kid show. Like, no, it legit made me laugh. He's like, He's like, "Don't tell me a monster that blows itself up." And it was just like,
I think I must have missed that, probably taking notes or something. I
but it was
just-
just so like it was so dismissive. But it's again, how many times have these monsters been defeated? So he's like, "What is it? It just blow itself up?" And then in one of the later episodes, he zings a Rita where he's like, "Why don't you try thinking with your head instead of your mouth?" Again, really playing into this marital strife.
Yeah,
Like,
they're really like this cliche of like a married couple that just bickers and stuff. It was amusing because I don't know how much of that I saw on the original run. Obviously, I was there for Zed. I don't know if I saw when they got married, so I don't know if I really experienced that whole dynamic where they're fighting all the time. But it was pretty frequent just even during this arc, so maybe it was just a common theme because they're like beating each other. Oh, you're playing stupid. Oh, now what are you gonna do about it? I even have a note right here where he points out the flaw of the plan of getting them to adopt the cat. Because what if someone else adopted the cat and then like Rita, sends Rito to make sure it's them that takes the cat,
yes, yeah,
and he
it's
scares he scares some poor unsuspecting couple at the shelter while he's at it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny in the Follow That Cab episode when again Kim's in the cab with Bulk and Skull. Zed literally says like Bulk and Skull are there, and I'm sure it's not the only episode where Rita and or Zed actually say the names Bulk and Skull, but it's the
Oh,
first
really?
instance that I've caught because again, and I say this all the time. I mean, I'm watching again like these larger, the multi-part episodes, the bigger episodes where more of the monumental stuff happens. I'm largely skipping over a lot of those one-offs. So maybe there's more of this, but it was so weird. Like it took me for a second. I was like, yeah, like what do like what do Rita and Zed think of Bulk and Skull? Like the idea that these all-powerful evil masters are like that Bulk and Skull are even on their radar is
Yeah,
fascinating to me.
they're aware of these two dimwit doofuses. Just because also another thing on the note of them, it's in the first episode that like they're all hanging at the juice bar and they pop up from under a table.
Yep.
Like the Rangers are just like, what were they doing there? How long were they there before they popped up? And it becomes a thing. Like they do that a few times. It's in one of the later episodes. Like Ernie even calls them on it. They're like from behind the juice bar. He's like, "You guys got to stop doing that." And that was like a fun self-referential joke too, because it was just like, what are they doing? Where are they waiting to like pop up to make their presence known? It's just for the sake of the camera. It's like it's
I know.
ridiculous.
It's very funny, but it really tickles me the idea that I don't know, like when Rita and Zed are just relaxing at the end of the day, like maybe they probably talk about Bulk and Skull. They're probably like, oh, we got to deal with Rito and Squat and Babu. They got Bulk and Skull. But as far as the marital strife, I mean, that's one of the fun things about rewatching it now as an adult because like I think as kids, obviously you get that they're bickering, but I think there's a lot of maybe those one-liners and stuff that just kind of like go over our head. But there's I mentioned before we have this amazing scene in the Changing of the Zords uh, multi-parter where Zed and Tommy, the White Ranger, fight. And at the climax of that fight, Tommy throws Saba, the dagger sword, at Zed's staff. And when it hits it, it turns it back into a snake. Now, we saw when Zed made his debut in the mutiny, right? And he materialized on the moon and he turned around, and he had the snake crawling all over him, and the snake turned into the staff. And then apparently that direct blow to the staff was enough to cause Zed to retreat, and he goes back to the moon. He's talking to Rita. He's like, "You bit my staff." I cannot believe they didn't sneak in a joke like having Rita call him out over going soft, so to speak. I feel like that was a prime opportunity. I was surprised. I said, "Oh, that was a lot of restraint." I would have put money on some kind of barb along those lines.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I did take a note because this is also it's a funny connection in a way. It's in one of the later episodes. Um, she says like, well, you better hang on to your scepter, Z-Man. And I'm like, oh, Z-Man, that's my nickname in the community around this radio show that I've been involved with the host. Been friends with him, and my family's friends with him for a long time. And my little brother, when he was doing radio in college. He was the H man, that was his on-air name, and then he became for a bit the protege of this radio host, and he was known as the H man. And when I first called in to support him, I said I was the Z man, and it's kind of stuck. So for hearing Rita going Z man, it was funny, but also that she says, you better hold on to your scepter. It almost sounds like they got into a fight, and she's like, you sleep on the couch, and so why don't you hold on to your scepter? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah, no, I know. Like little stuff like that is particularly amusing, especially now. But they use Kat to spy on the Rangers, later to steal Kimberly's power coin, but especially initially in that Ranger Catastrophe, she lures Tommy into her car for a ride. This is a very cautionary tale, because then they're transported into one of Zed's dimensions, and they're in distress until the Rangers can figure out a way to to teleport them out. But yeah, a real cautionary tale. You got to watch out for these blonde girls and fast cars. Tommy really learned his lesson, I think.
And I was watching that and observing, and I'm like, Kim takes this surprisingly well. Like, there's not a hint. Like, you see Kat being jealous of their relationship, where she's, under control. So she's out to get them for Rita, but she also seems like there's a part of her that genuinely is jealous and she wants Tommy. But then she's doing her thing to manipulate Tommy. He's like, oh, come on, let me just get you want to get a ride in my car and this and that. Oh, because he's like, oh, I would love a car like that. And she's like, oh, you come give me a ride with it. And so then the Rangers discover, and like looking in Zordon's crystal ball, I think. And Kim's like, who's that girl? And it's not like, who's that girl with him? It's not that at all. She's like, what's going on? No, it's just like she's confused, and then pretty quickly caring about her well-being. And there's no conflict of like, Tommy, why were you alone with her in the car? What's that all about? Like, I heard on another episode, you guys were talking about like what the deal was with the dynamic, the relationship between Tommy and Kim. And, watching these, I think it's pretty clear they're boyfriend and girlfriend. Like, obviously they're only going to show so much romance in, ostensibly a kid's show, but, their bond is pretty clear. And, he's caring for her and she's caring for him. And, when he's at her bedside, when she's in the hospital in one of the later episodes. And so, yeah, but then that there's this blonde girl in the car with him, leaning on him. She's like leaning in close with him, and Kim just brushes it off. And then it's just like, oh, we got to help Tommy and this girl. Okay, you're a better woman than some, I guess.
So it's so funny you say that. So yeah, I agree. And I know we had talked about that in another episode. And as I was watching these, I was like, oh, okay, that kind of answers that question that we were talking about the nature of their relationship. And I agree. Like, yes, it's very, very, very chaste and very G-rated. But like, yeah, you get the sense that they're together, right? But the other thing is, I read a little bit more into Kim's "Who's that girl?" line. Like, maybe I was projecting, but I felt like there was a little bit, like a little something behind there. Like, it was quickly, superseded by her concern for the two of them. But there was like the "Who's that girl?" But
no, yeah. Just in that one line, I agree with you that it sounds like there could be a tinge to that, but then it's gone like instantly. Like, so
yeah.
she's like, oh well, I got to save her too, and there's no further talk about it, no suspicion, and by the end of the arc, she's basically like best buddies with Kat.
and that's the thing where, and again, I don't think this is even nitpicky. It's just especially as an adult watching it, like those are some of the things I long for watching it now. It's like, yeah, I want to see the follow-up scene where Kim's like, Tommy, like, I'm so glad everything's okay. But what were you doing? Like, what were you doing with her in the first place? I mean, I think it's a fair enough question to ask. It doesn't even need to be contentious, but it's just like, hey, what was, because they had plans to meet. I know Kim wasn't there yet, but, and then, Kat
Yeah, they were supposed to have like a movie date. And then, so that compounds everything. They're supposed to have a movie date. And then he's in this car with this blonde that, she has no idea who it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. But what I was going back to what I was alluding to earlier about how I like how this echoes so much of Green with Evil, because, obviously that was such a strong, iconic storyline for the show. And we do know later on, Tommy and Kat have their romance. So the idea that they both kind of come in the same way, I kind of like that parallel. But one of the things that I said when we were talking about Green with Evil is, man, I wish that they showed us like any instances of Tommy resisting, right? And
Mm.
here you do get that, especially as we get deeper into these episodes. And it's actually the first time, and that's why I'm glad we both watched Follow That Cat, because that's the first instance where Cat starts to have memories, right? Because Rita's like, you evil girl. And then that triggers Kat, and she remembers
Well, there's
being,
yeah, the good
in
girl.
elementary school, and it's like, oh, good girl, like she was involved with a charity project or something like that. And so I really liked that they added that layer to this, you know?
Yeah, I guess maybe they learned from the original, and they're like, "Well, let's maybe do it a little different this time." But did you say that Tommy and Kat get involved later on?
I'm sorry, spoiler alert, but yeah.
Is
So
it is that after the note?
yes,
Okay. I've
yeah.
heard of the note. I haven't seen the episode with the note.
Yeah, Kim writes Tommy a Dear John letter during Zio. I think it's the we're going to be getting to it not too long from now. I think it's the There's No Business Like Snow Business 3-parter, I believe, where he gets the letter from her. But and then the
Mm.
other thing, going back to the comparisons to Green with Evil, and again, I don't know that Power Rangers was ever better than Green with Evil, although there's a lot that I've loved since then. But at the same time, you do kind of wonder the strategy of all of this, like with Tommy in Green with Evil, when he's under Rita's spell, he instantly becomes this, cold, aloof jerk, essentially, right, to the Rangers. And, they had only had such limited interactions with him before, but it seemed like this guy made a complete 180 and he's, blowing everybody off and he's just working out, intensely in the juice bar and he's not engaging with them, right? Whereas here, Kat is more like a spy, and she's infiltrating them, and she's, trying to undermine them and things like that. And it made a lot more sense, right? Like if you're gonna if you're gonna put someone under a spell, send them into this friend group, let the Rangers think they're a friend, they're an ally. Like that made a lot of sense.
Rather than him just being an outright jerk in his day-to-day form.
Yeah, right. I mean, and again, I guess it's cool to see the two different spins on it, right? So I'm glad that they did both. But this was a nice way to kind of still have the parallel, but then to really carve out a different path for Kat. I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, and on the note of Green with Evil, this is in Catastrophe Part 2. So yeah, it was kind of crazy seeing him go head to head with Zed. Because I don't know how much at all Zed really was like a direct, fighting with any Rangers, because they always used, their generic, henchmen or monsters. So whether it's the putties or the Tengas or like one of the monsters that's created. So that was kind of cool to see, not having seen that. But then also within this whole arc, he also fights Goldar one-on-one too, which I'm guessing he might have done during Green with Evil. I don't know. Or was that Jason?
That was Jason, but Tommy went head to head with him in those later, all those episodes where he's losing his powers and coming back. Like there were a couple of Goldar face-offs there, including one where he was like completely powerless out in the field. It was great.
Oh, cool. Yeah, maybe I'll get to those. But yeah, obviously you feel Zed and Goldar. You feel like they're legitimate threats. I mean, so much like the henchmen are just so disposable, especially the Z putties. When I'm watching the show and I'm seeing, okay, I guess they're now with these Tenga guys. I wonder what happened to the putties. Oh, maybe they realized that they shouldn't have had such an obvious weak spot right on the chest that causes them to literally explode. I guess they finally realized. But yeah, so like seeing these guys fight, that was pretty cool, because they're serious threats and they're intense. But at one point in part 2 of Catastrophe, Tommy's fighting Goldar and he's like, "You should work with us." And Tommy's like, "Me? Join forces with evil? Never!" And I'm like, that's how your whole character arc started, buddy.
That's an opportunity where maybe it could have been like never, never again, or I would
Yeah.
never choose that. There could have been a nice way to kind of tie that back
You
to the
you
journey
you
he's
had
had.
me once, but I'll make sure that never happens again. Something like, because then he even acknowledges it. I think when it's like wrapping up the arc and he's comforting Kat and being like, "Yeah, they had me under a spell too once upon a time." So
And look, I know, I'm glad. I mean, that was a nice callback and a way for them to bond, and I'm glad that it was there. But it's like, Kat might have some. You would imagine Kat might have some follow-up questions. It's just like, oh, okay. But
yeah,
no,
I
the
mean,
fight
I
with
do.
Zed, yeah.
I do always like when a show has respect for its own continuity. And so that's sometimes, stuff that came up in these episodes that it's like, it's nice to see they kept track of things and they brought things up where it made sense to.
Totally, totally. So yeah, the fight with Zed, I think I might have been conflating it with one of the later multi-part things. But yeah, so that was so it's Ranger Catastrophe, right? When they're in the car and they're in the other dimension, and then the car disappears, and then it's Tommy and he faces off against Zed, right? It's in that episode.
It might be, I might not remember which time is him and Zed and him and Goldar, but
Well, in any
it
event,
sounds about right.
but we get this this face off is really cool. And again, we talked about the staff and all that stuff, but it was yeah, I mean, it was just really cool to see them fighting like that. Wait, in my head, I'm thinking that it was the when Tommy's going to rescue Kimberly, but wasn't it then. I might be mixing these up when he has the face off. Well, in
Yeah,
any event,
I don't. I mean,
it,
it's a lot of episodes together that you can kind of confuse one thing with the other.
yeah. So again in my head, I think I remembered it as being in the changing of the Zords, but I could have flipped them. In any event, yeah, I'm almost positive this was the first instance of a one-on-one fight between Zed and a Ranger. I mean, not that they've never been together before, but an actual fight. And I don't know how many more times that happens. That was really cool, and of course, fitting that it was Tommy. So that was. Oh, and then in the changing of the Zords arc, and we'll get into the kind of the setup and what was going on there, but you know, Zed teleports into the command center. This is at the point where, Kimberly, her power coin's been stolen, her energy, her life force are draining away, and then she's taken, right? And, her time is running out, and the Rangers are really up against the ropes here. And they allow Zed to teleport in to give his terms, right? That the Rangers have to pilot these new ancient Zords that he's awakened in order to save Kimberly's life. But it's like Zed in the command center, like that. I thought that was really cool.
Right now you mentioned it reminds me. I was like, okay, so not only does Zed appear, but he like teleported his throne and billowing smoke. It's a package deal.
Yeah, you know what? The smoke I didn't mind so much, but the throne, I was like, really?
Well, it's
I
just
don't know.
it's this he like took this whole atmospheric vibe with him in the teleportation. It's like you could have just shown up on your own for this. You really have to have this whole like portion of your your stronghold, and it somehow the smoke traveled with you in the teleportation. It was funny.
It is true, but like that was so cool, and you to actually see Zordon and Zed communicating with each other in the same space.
Yeah.
Again, it's like I think any instances, we're so used to the formula of these episodes, and there's a lot of comfort and familiarity and value in the repetition, and especially for kids who are watching it. But when you get things like this that put a different spin on it, or put the characters in different settings and different configurations, it's it's just like the stakes feel really high.
Yeah, you got to mix up things. Obviously, still, they hit some of those marks. Obviously, okay, they fight the henchmen of the moment, then they send in the monster, then they make the monster big, and then they get the Zords. Then they fight the monster with the Zords, and they blow them up, and everything else happens around it, basically.
Yeah. So, while we're talking changing of the Zord, so this is a second batch of episodes, a three-part arc. So this was again, I feel like a little convoluted, but so essentially with Rita and Zed, they've discovered these ancient Zords and they want to awaken and control them. But in order to do so, they need the technology of the Rangers' current Zords. And in order to obtain that, they need Kimberly's power coin to then be able to take over the Falcon Zord. And of course, they use Kat to steal Kim's power coin from her bag and then infiltrate the Falcon Zord during a battle and overtake Tommy and take control of the Zord. And they also need a power source to run these Zords, and that's where Ninjor comes into play. So a lot of moving pieces here.
Yeah, yeah. I forgot to mention also, discovering these episodes for the first time. It was interesting seeing some differences, like the introduction. Amy Jo Johnson is like top billing, so that was kind of cool. I guess maybe her status as being longest tenured. I mean, Billy was too, but I just thought it was cool to see her right up front.
One other thing I'm curious to get your take on is their, I mean, the ninja outfits and powers, right? So we now
Oh
have
boy,
this,
yeah.
we have this intermediate step, right? It used to be, they would fight as civilians and then they would morph when things escalated. But now they don't even fight as civilians. They just instantly go into this ninja garb and the stunt people come in, which again, I talked about this before. I don't love this. I really think this is a weakness of this stretch of Mighty Morphin, because I feel like one of the big draws was seeing the actors doing so many of those, those fighting scenes, and you lose that. But hand in hand with that, they have like this insane battery of ninja powers. And we talked about this when we did Ninja Quest. Like, this is another one of those things I just did not really remember as a kid. And in that Ninja Quest episode, I asked Lance, I was like, yeah, like, does this continue? They have more powers. Boy, do they. I mean, like, Aisha's, teleporting down into the ground. Adam gets huge and he's holding the Tenga Warriors in his
Yeah.
hand. He
That
splits into
confused
two.
the heck out of me. I'm like, when did he become a giant? Like, I didn't realize that was a ninja power. I was just like, wait, did they get shrunk somehow? And he's scooping them up. Like, what is going on? It caught me off guard. I was not prepared for him to be a giant.
I mean, Rocky seems to be jumping into like a pocket dimension behind a tree at one point. Kimberly and I think Adam too at another one of them. Like, they have super speed. What was your reaction? Do you like this angle?
I mean, I probably some of it I didn't even pick up on because I was just like going with the flow of it, and I was also taking notes. But yeah, one thing on the note of seeing the actors, it's kind of ridiculous because in the sequence of transformation into the ninjas, you see them, civilian. Then there's like a step where you see them in the ninja garb with their face present, and then there's a third step, and the face is covered except for the eyes. So like they could have stopped at the second step to let them be themselves more on camera, but no, they just have it and then quickly they're replaced so that it could be stunt people. And yeah, but it was also interesting. I was like wondering what makes them differentiate between whether they're going to be ninja form or classic rangers, because there's sometimes they go one or the other, and I was like, well, when do they decide? One thing I was disappointed in, I guess, I mean, it comes with no longer using those Zords, but like the morphing, they just call out their name of their ranger and say power. So white ranger power, pink ranger power. And it's like, it's just so generic. You're just saying who you are. It's a lot less cool than shouting dinosaur names. You'd think there was something else that they could have done connected with their current Zords or something. But that was just something I thought.
No, I agree. I think you lose something during the morphing sequence for sure. And when as far as them being, not being able to see their face, thus allowing the stunt people to come in. I suspect this was a function of, budget and time, probably more than anything, just trying to churn these episodes out. But, so I know it's not this situation, but it always makes me think of one of the interviews that Robert Downey Jr. was doing when he was promoting, I feel like it was either Civil War, I'm obviously one of the Avengers movies, but I feel like it was one of the ones where he had more of a supporting role, but maybe not. I don't know. In any event, I remember him on a talk show being like, once that helmet comes down, I'm off getting a massage. And it's like, I know that wasn't the case here. Like, I know they really worked these actors and didn't pay them particularly well. So I don't think that
Oh
they were
boy,
off
that's
being,
a whole other thing. Yeah.
I know they weren't off being pampered, but it just kind of always makes me think of that. It's like once that ninja hood comes on, I'm like, no, they're not there. And I don't know. It's one thing when they're morphed and we're used to that, but I felt like we kind of lost something. And the powers, I'd be curious, honestly, audience, I would love to hear from more people about these ninja powers, and maybe I'm being too hard on them. I like, there's something that's cool, but I don't know. It just feels like too much.
Hmm.
I don't know. It is what it is. And the other thing too is, the Mighty Morphin season 3 was relatively short. It's
Oh
only
yeah.
like 30 plus episodes. So, we're not in this realm for very long, and we're pretty deep into the season now. This is late 95. We're pretty deep in with these episodes we're watching. And in this arc, we get new Zords. I mean, these new Shogun Zords are not around for very long. It's a pretty swift tenure for them. Did you like these new ones?
Again, I didn't really have much of an opinion on the Zords. I guess I was more focused on the character stuff and the the one-on-one, well, not one-on-one, but like the actual fighting scenes. The Zords, once the Zords come into play, it's kind of, that's where it's very formulaic. It's, okay, they're in there, they're megazorded up, they fight, there's sparks flying, and eventually the villain goes kaboom. And so, I mean, I guess they looked fine from what I remember. So I didn't have one, really one way or the other, anything, any special opinions about the Zords, really.
I got it's kind of like an ebb and flow with me with the Zords because obviously I love the original Dino Zords. They will forever remain my favorite. I was not really into the Thunder Zords that they got when Zed came into the picture. I don't
Mm,
hate them or anything, but like the unicorn, the griffin, like I just those didn't really do anything for me. The Ninja Zords that we saw in the movie and then on the show, those I liked, and I guess probably because of the movie and my memory of the toys and all of that, I have a softer spot for those. Really could not care less for the Shogun Zords, and then
mm.
I really don't even remember the Zeo ones, but I'm sure I will once I watch those episodes again. It'll come back to me. But so I'm sort of like every other. I really tend to like you know. But so we're at this point now where, like I said before, I think it's a an interesting ethical dilemma that Zed puts the Rangers in, right? Where again, the cat has stolen Kimberly's power coin. There's some great sort of mythology or explanation for why Kimberly is being so affected by this. Zordon explains that when Ninjor gave them these new powers, the coin was tied to their body, right? So with the coin in the hands of evil, that's why Kimberly is getting so weak and kind of like losing her life force. Like that was a cool connection point. And yeah, Zed again, they have to let him into the command center. He issues this demand, like he wants the Rangers to pilot his Zords and destroy Angel Grove in order to save Kimberly's life. And then there's obviously this whole bit where they're reluctant certainly, but getting to the point of feeling like they have no choice. Of course, Billy always comes up with a solution, and he's going to find a way to use the coins and usurp control of the Zords from Rita and Zed. And hand in hand with that, Tommy is of course going into this other dimension to rescue Kim, and it all works out. But I liked this dilemma that the Rangers had to face.
Yeah, kind of like that, like classic trolley problem or something where it's like, oh, do you run over this person or do you run over these people or something, some ethical, moral dilemma of like which one to do. So yeah, it was a kind of a no-win thing. But then Tommy at one point it's like, I think I might have another option or something like that. Also, when you mentioned about them piloting the Zords for Zed, did they explain where he got his own Zords from? I don't remember that.
And they just found him. They were they're just
Because I'm like, there's Zords, and like Zords, that's like from Zordon, so like it's from the good guys world, but somehow bad guys have their own set. All of a sudden, I might have
I
missed
know.
something. I don't.
No, I don't think we ever really get any kind of. I don't think we get any kind of really meaningful backstory. But it's just the other thing too is Rita and Zed are always the cause of their own undoing, and it's like they were really pushing it right and trying to force the Rangers into this. Like they have minions they could have put into those Zords immediately, but they didn't because the other thing here that I didn't mention is that apparently with the Falcon Zord in control of Rita and Zed, like none of the other Zords are operational. So like the Rangers
Oh
don't have their
yeah,
usual ones.
it's like they depend. Yeah, I think I wrote something down, but it's like, oh, that's a great system. With the one Zord, the others don't work. You think you think maybe they wouldn't have it like that in case of a problem? Like, why are they all reliant on the one? There's a whole team, but oh well, we're out of commission.
Yeah. Well, again, it's just like the putties with the big Z on their chest that disintegrates them. Not the
Yeah,
best planning from either side, but
yeah,
uh,
some bad planning. I remember when Kat infiltrated the Zord when she was bad. I was like, well, they didn't have a security system or anything. But then I realized it's because she had. Then they explained she had the coin, and that's how she had access.
yeah. And again, another echo of Green with Evil. I mean, that was such a standout moment when Tommy enters
Oh
the
yeah,
Megazord.
yeah, he starts freaking stuff.
But I gotta give Zed. So again, I know ultimately this proves their undoing, but there's also something so sinister about the psychology of Zed's plan, right? Like he wants to. It's not just that he wants to defeat the Rangers or destroy Angel Grove. It's like he wants them to be behind the wheel at the time, right? Like he wants us all to be at their hands. It's pretty nefarious.
Yeah, yeah, and what was I gonna say? Oh, I was thinking about with Rita and Zed, just when you mentioned, oh yeah, you just mentioned about destroying Angel Grove. This is a thought I had too. I guess it sort of depends on how much, if any, awareness the general public has of the source of these monster attacks. Like if they know about this, witch up on the moon. Because a thought occurred to me when, thinking about Power Rangers and stuff and hearing your, other episodes of your show where they talk about how they just, really trash the place in these battles where the buildings are getting destroyed. I'm like, do you ever think like those astronauts are hanging out and then the news report comes on and it's another monster attack, and they just gotta look at each other and like, pull on their collars. Like they're kind of responsible for all of it. These 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 nitwit astronauts who opened that dumpster set the whole thing in motion. She could have been locked away, like Zordon had intended, if not for these dopey dudes in aluminum spacesuits.
I know. It all goes back to those guys. You're right. But yeah, I mean, again, I like a lot about this really worked. Like I said, I didn't really need new Zords, and I didn't particularly care for these. They just felt, you know what? I guess I didn't feel they were very distinct individually. I guess that's the thing that it's cool when they all come together, but that individually, historically, like each of these Zords, like really felt like its own thing, right? And tied to the particular Ranger. And these just kind of felt like an army of kind of like the
Mm,
same kind of Zord. So
I
maybe
get
that's
that.
maybe that's kind of why it didn't do much for me. But again, in any event, Tommy's able to rescue Kimberly, and the Rangers are able to win the day. But they are still, we end this arc with Kimberly's power coin still missing, and she's going to share her power from the other Rangers. Just like Tommy was doing when his powers were fading, back during the Green Ranger days. But again, I mean, like this arc is just kind of marching along here. So at that point, we have that follow that cab episode, which I guess is probably most notable. Like we said earlier, we start to see the cracks in the spell over Kat where she's having these flashes. So that was kind of cool to see. I really, this also introduces the shark cycles, and it also sets up this business about this gymnastics coach that Kim wants to meet. Right. So now we're really building to the point where she's going to have a reason to leave. And I also have to say, and I've been listening, and the audience knows I've been hard on Bulk and Skull, but I've really been coming around on them a lot. And I felt like this was a good app. They ultimately, Kimberly's car gets stolen. They ultimately get it back for her. I really felt like that was a nice moment for the two of those junior police.
Yeah, they actually were doing their job, but at first they mess it up, right? Because they
Wow.
just like think the guy's going into his own car and having trouble. And the guy is such a caricature of like a suspicious dude who'd be like into crime, and then but then yeah, they do manage to get it back, and like it was strange to see her like genuinely grateful to them, like with the history they've had, where they were the bullies and they picked on the group and they were, just a nuisance, and they're like trying to get a date with her early on, where that was part of their characters. Um, but now she's, I think she gives one of them a hug, if not both of them, and yeah, so throughout this arc, there's some really, I mean, I was going to say there's silly stuff with them, but of course that's kind of what they're there for, the comic relief. But also, I don't think I ever saw Lieutenant Stone before. So he's the third piece of this puzzle. And he's just as goofy as they are. He's like the community commanding officer, but he's a goofball too. I mean, it was like he's trying to come on hard on them and like keep them in shape, but he's just as ridiculous at times.
Yeah, and he'll be a regular on the show for a while. Eventually, they all leave the police force and they become private detectives. It's a whole thing, and the
Yeah,
the
in
ongoing
within
evolution of Bulk and Skull.
yeah, within this, I think it seems like it's unspoken, but they're wearing like cop uniforms early on, but then they seem like they're detectives later when they're like investigating the coach, because like a news report comes on in the juice bar about like a suspicious man with an accent and he's this tall and stuff, and so then their arc for those episodes is thinking that this German coach that is world renowned and he's there and he's going to help coach Kimberly to be ready for the games. They're suspicious that he's this spy and they're following him. And oh yeah, no German. There's one point where like Jason Narvi must have just like been a real ham and like really loved doing impressions and voices and stuff, because there's one point where he goes like, "We have ways of making you talk," and I'm like, is that a reference that's meant to like imply Nazis? Like, where I know that's like a phrase here. I don't know what the origin of that phrase is, but he's doing this German voice, and I'm like, that kind of came out of left field. And then he does a Bill Clinton impression at one point too. They're like, who else would that describe? And he's like, the president of the United States. And
That's right.
it's like, what is going on with these guys? But yeah, then like later on when they're investigating him, they're looking like private detectives, and they're not in the cop uniform. So it's like, did that change just happen behind the scenes? Or are they just mixing it up in how they dress?
I think that was just them taking it upon themselves and sort of trying to act the part of detectives. But no, it's a plot point later on where they like officially leave the force and open up a private detective agency and all that stuff. So
Oh, okay,
yeah, no,
gotcha.
that is still coming. But yeah, I know it's you get that right. Again, I continue to come around on Bulk and Skull, and this iteration of them in particular is the junior police patrol.
Oh yeah, and
I think
one
they found a
one
good balance
episode
for them.
One episode you mentioned something about where maybe it would be more palatable without the music, and I was thinking the opposite when I heard you say that, because I'm like, I think the music is what sells it. Like, it just shows like, okay, it's time for some goofy antics now. Like, just relax and have fun, and don't take this too seriously. I don't know, I just feel like that's their theme, and that's the sign that something really ridiculous is about to happen. So, you know,
I think it's just that where I landed on this in the Ninja Quest episode. I think I just needed the music just a little to ease off the music a little bit, like just a little lower in the mix, because I do find it a bit grating. But I'm not saying that I would want silence to accompany them. I think that would not work either. So I
mm,
think it's just like it was just a little overpowering at times, but
okay,
maybe even in these
fair.
episodes it's fine. And yeah, you certainly get used to it. But I will say, just going back to the car thief, you're right. It is like a very stereotypical, like, this is a thief. I really feel like for the kids, they should have made more of a point. It should have been like a guy in a suit or something like that. It's like you can't assume, right? I feel like they could have made, subtly at least, but they could have been kind of like a larger point about, like, you don't make assumptions. And the guy who seems like he's going to the bank or whatever, that might be the car thief. I don't know. Just saying.
Yeah, it's a little smacking you on the head with it on the nose. Like, see, this guy, he's clearly the bad guy here. He's the guy who's going to take the car.
And then we get to Kimberly's farewell arc, a different shade of pink, where she's just all in on the training now, right, for the Pan Global Gymnastic Games. And this coach is, really pushing her. And, Rita's whole plot is to prevent her from achieving her dream. Now, and so the whole idea is to run the team, and Kimberly in particular ragged, right? Make her too tired fighting monsters to continue with her training. And eventually it does get to the point, as we see in a rather dramatic moment, where she falls off the beam. She's practicing at night. She's tired. She's too tired. And she falls and she hits her head. She goes to the hospital. It's a whole thing. Now, I'm of two minds here with Rita's plan. I want to know, tell me what you think. On the one hand, I feel like, just like with Zed and making the Rangers pilot the Zords, like there's something so sinister. It's like this is her heart's desire, and I'm going to keep her from getting it. Like, it is a very witchy thing to do. It's perfectly in keeping for Rita. But on the other hand, if you hate Kimberly so much and you hate the Rangers so much, it's like, she's trying to leave.
Yeah, the motive does seem odd. It's like, oh, I'm gonna stop her from doing a thing she likes. Like, why are you so invested in that? Again, like you say, it's one stranger around. Unless if you didn't put Cat in their sights, if you didn't set up this other female to take her place, you could have had one less ranger to deal with. But they're often foisted by their own petards. Rita and Zed.
You know what? It's funny. I didn't even think that piece of it, but you're right. It's like
I just
not
thought
all.
of it just now when you kind of you set the ball in motion for me. And it's like, yeah, well, I did find it when she first says, I want to, stop her from getting the thing she wants. And now you say, it's like, well, yeah, why is that important to you? You should be wanting to get the Rangers as far away from being Rangers as possible, and let alone here, I'm going to serve up on a plate a perfect replacement for her.
And again, she's been burned before with Tommy. And there in some ways it was worse because it's like you expanded the team. Here it's like you gave a replacement. In that instance, the team got stronger. Give him a Zord and everything. So yeah, that piece of it is that is really funny. That yeah, she gives them just a ready made replacement. It's but with Rita, I feel like with Rita and Kimberly, I feel like there's some mean girl energy coming from Rita because there's even going back to this whole idea of the like evil cat's jealousy towards Kim and her interest in Tommy. Like Rita has remarks here and there where she's like, "Oh, I wonder what little Kimmy thinks about that," or stuff like that. So I feel like there's like a little mean girl thing that Rita feels towards Kimberly that might be fueling some of this.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe. Isn't there like an episode where Kimberly like sort of becomes Rita, or she's play acting like to play along with them, where like she's in the costume?
Yeah, you gotta watch that episode, man. It's
Yeah,
from
I
a
did.
from a performance standpoint, what Amy Jo Johnson does in it is tremendous. It's a super creepy episode where Zed wants to make Kimberly his queen. And as I said when we talked about it, I mean, I really feel like they could have just made it like Zed had a nephew and he wanted to pair. It's still creepy, but
Yeah.
there was just this whole other component to it. But anyway, they capture Kimberly and they try to put a spell on her, but it doesn't work. And she is aware of what they're trying to do, and so she's still in control. But she pretends that the spell worked, and she does her Rita impression, and it's so good. Like even if you just watch that one scene, it's so good.
Yeah, I gotta check that one. Yeah, but definitely when you go back and watch some of these, there's definitely things that maybe wouldn't fly today. But but I do find it amusing that Zed wants to make him his bride, because one thing I always remember about the first movie, like Goldar is with Ivan Ooze, and Ivan Ooze says something like, "Oh, and then I'll get that cute little pink ranger," and Goldar's like, "Oh, you think she's cute too?" And it's just this great, funny moment, and I was like, I'm with you guys. back then when I saw it, I'm like, "Oh, that's nice." I mean, they're on the same page about that, and they're acknowledging that Amy Jo Johnson is, very pretty. So
Yeah, I mean it's speaking for the audience and acknowledging it in that way. So,
yeah, but
but
just and again, Goldar doesn't often get a chance to be like comical. He's often like, he's the heavy, he's the muscle. So having a line that like gets a genuine laugh is just something you don't expect from him.
yeah. So we talked about Kim falling off the balance, and this is where Kat snaps out of it. I mean, and that's the other thing too, where we kind of have to give Kat the edge over Tommy. It's like she not only was she starting to break through, but she actually is able to shake off the spell, and in that moment of selflessness of going in to help Kim when she falls, like is able to return to her senses. So
Right. Yeah, they even kind of explain it at one point. They say it was this selfless act. It might be a little cliched. It's like, oh, when you do this one thing, it has the power to, break a magical spell. Somehow the one caveat of this magical spell that's controlling this, teenage girl is if you do something, that's a purely selfless act. I guess that overpowers the evil magic.
once Kim is recovering, she says she's not going to go back to gymnastics. She's going to focus on being a ranger and all that. And we get more of Kat's backstory where we find out that she was this great diver in Australia and she was going to go to the Olympics, but she hit her head on one of her dives and she never got back in the water. And she's telling this to Kim as a kind of a cautionary tale. And then, of course, by the end of this three-parter, Kat gets back on the diving board, and that inspires Kim, and that leads to that that big demonstration that we talked about earlier that earns her a spot with this coach, and she's going to go off to Florida to train for these games and all that, and necessitating her leaving, and we'll circle back to that. But you know, looking at kind of the arc of Kat, starting literally as the cat, and then we see her under the spell, and then kind of starting to break through, and eventually fully breaking through, revealing more of her backstory, relating to Kim, inspiring Kim. Do you think the show did a good, especially for you, watching these for the first time? Do you feel like the show did a good job of introducing the replacement ranger, and not just for any ranger, but for a beloved, Kimberly?
Yeah, definitely. Again, it's within the span of only so many episodes, but it's still given enough room to breathe to really give her her character arc. So you get to know her a little. You see her under control, but then you get to know a little of her backstory, and you see that, and then coincidentally enough, her backstory has her doing gymnastics and like things where she was trying to get in the same competition. So there's these parallels, and then they bond over it, and then she kind of uses her experience of being scared off from it, from her accident, and never trying again, to basically be like, wink wink, nudge nudge, you should not let your fears hold you back. You should, just because you had this fall doesn't mean you need to give up your dreams. And so it just, it's quite a turn from her being so jealous and being, controlled by evil, and trying to, get in their way and, get rid of her, to, now being like this encouraging figure that, it's like they become like best friends almost, like, before all is said and done. Oh, another thing, another thing with her, I just wanted to bring up. So yeah, she'd been transformed back and forth as an actual cat, and then they turn her into a cat monster, like you said. Somehow, I guess when she's transformed into a cat monster, she loses her accent for some reason. The cat doesn't have an Australian accent. She's speaking, just American, American voice. So I just like, what? That's an interesting choice that they chose. Like the transformation into cat monster somehow wiped away her Australian accent. I don't know.
It's a good question. Oh, speaking of Australia, so obviously both the character of Cat and the actress Catherine Sutherland from Australia, and unless I'm remembering this wrong, she had originally auditioned for Dulcea in the Mighty Morphin movie,
Oh,
and
really?
obviously didn't get that, but they kept her in mind, and then brought her here for this. But I
Oh, I
have to
didn't know that.
say, this idea of transitioning Rangers and everything, even when we were talking about, or maybe especially when we were talking about Jason, Zach, and Trini leaving, as like awkward as that was, not having those actors there. Again, I thought the show did a good job, and I think where they particularly excelled was in introducing Rocky, Adam, and Aisha as this unit, and you got to see a lot of them with the kids, a lot of them with the Rangers. You saw them in the command center. And so they got the audience used to them and comfortable with them. And I feel like they did something similar here, but you had the benefit of actually being able to have those scenes with Kimberly and Kat. And what I also liked was that Kat, even though yes, there are a lot of parallels, and especially with the the gymnastics on the diving and all of that, and that was like, whoa, what a coincidence. But at the same time, Kimberly, especially at the beginning of the show, was very much kind of like the valley girl, and was like obsessed with shopping and clothes and stuff like that, and like very American, I guess, or again a specific type, but very much felt
California,
like
yeah,
yes.
Valley, yeah, yeah.
And then you have Cat, so you have this this more international flavor and component. So I like that they, again, it wasn't just like trying to put in a carbon copy of Amy Jo Johnson slash Kim.
Yeah, and also watching these, you see how far she's come as a character. That she's, clearly in the seasons, between, her early on, where she was basically kind of like a stereotype of that type of girl who's just obsessed with shopping and the mall and all that. And like, no way, totally, that kind of thing. Like, she's a very different character. I mean, she still has her basic traits, and, she's, kind and caring and sweet. But yeah, she's moved away from that, like, sort of more one dimensional personality. And so that, that was cool to see. I actually was just watching some unrelated clips too, and I saw like clips from like the first episode where they're all kind of rejecting Zordon initially, and they walk away from the command center. So yeah, it just really shows uh, how far things have come since that original iteration. Oh, but
Absolutely, yeah.
speaking of which, though, one thing I really did like, I think it was at the beginning of one of these episodes, but also, I mean, maybe I'm rushing with getting to the ending, but we've kind of been bouncing back and forth. But you know, at the ending, seeing her on the balance beam, it's just like such a great callback to how she was first introduced in that first episode. You first see her doing an act on, a routine on a balance beam, so it's like a full circle kind of thing. So that was nice too.
It's funny during the credits they show you more of her gymnastics routine at the and I was like, oh, it would have been cool to just like throw in a little clip from that first episode. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I guess I think that thought came to my mind too, that if they could have shown a parallel. But yeah, I thought that was very nice. How they wrapped it up in that credits of that last episode when I was still trying to compose myself from the goodbye, but that combined with those that montage at the end, really hit me about her whole story from beginning to end, and really feeling. Oh, speaking of montage, I mean, I don't know how known it is to the listeners, but obviously you're a big Rocky fan, and there's a training montage that just seems like perfectly. There's like even running on the beach, and it just I was like that's kind of a funny parallel. But like yeah, when she first I guess gets together with Schmidt, there's like a whole training montage that wouldn't have been out of place in like an '80s action movie.
No, I had the same thought, and yes, of course, my mind immediately went to Rocky. No, that was great. I love that, and no, I agree with you. Sort of the full circle aspect of the gymnastics, and when we get to that farewell, and we talked about again all of the exchange between Cat and Ninja, or what happened to Ninja, or all that. But when you get to that final farewell, that got you teary eyed at the command center. And I guess even before this, because this came up when Kim decided to embark on this training and this goal to make it to the Pan Global Games, and I like this aspect and this piece from Zordon, because Kim's initially reluctant, right? Because her duties come first, and Zordon is quick to say, I think at the beginning of this arc, and then certainly at the end, like he doesn't want them to miss out on these valuable life experiences. What did you think about this whole back and forth and just her decision and the way it played out?
Yeah, he's very encouraging, for the Rangers to make up their own minds. He's not like some overlord, being some overbearing presence telling them like, no, this is what you do. I'm in charge and you listen to me. They always have him as, almost I guess like a father figure in a way, because I think you've mentioned on the show before that they really don't have much parent presence in the show. I mean, I think they've maybe had some appear here and there within the show, but it's really kind of like they're not mainly in the picture. Even during this, when she fell and she's in the hospital, they quickly like have like uh, Tommy. He's on the phone in the hospital, and he tells Billy, "Oh yeah, her mom." She's in Paris and she's stuck. All the flights are booked. I'm like, oh, how convenient that all the flights are booked, so that we don't need to show her mom rushing to the hospital where her daughter has fallen. It's just she's stuck. Oh well, can't show the mom. Sorry, kids. So it just that was kind of funny to me. It's just a way to explain away why we don't see a parental figure there. But yeah, Zordon, he tends to have their best interests at heart. I mean, he's obviously got them on this mission and fighting Rita and Zed and their villainy, but he still recognizes they're their own people with their own hopes and dreams, and he's not going to force you to stay a ranger longer than you want to be one. So yeah, it's admirable.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's a good message, and also in Tommy's response to all of this. I mean, just like Kimberly was surprisingly nonchalant about Tommy in the car with Kat. Similarly here, this is another instance where, boy, especially since these two have been dating to some extent, it would have been nice to maybe have a little bit more of a conversation between the two of them about what this means for their real. Again, I know, as I always say, like I know the show is not built for these sorts of things, but it would have been nice to see. However, what I really did like, you don't get a lot, but at least Tommy said like I would never, something like I couldn't live with myself like if I let you turn this down, or if you turn this down for us,
Mhm.
or something like that. And again, I think a good message about sometimes having to let somebody go to do something that they need to.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. He's very supportive. One thing though, I will say, I remembered at one point in in the hospital, he's sitting at her bedside. He brought her this teddy bear and stuff, and I think like Zordon's calling on the Rangers for to deal with some situation, and I think Kim starts to get up like as if, well, I've got to go be part of, and he kind of like pushes her down. He like with his hand like by her like neck and shoulder area. He's like, No, no, you stay down." I'm like, that seems a bit like forceful. I mean, I'm sure, he didn't use a lot of force doing it, but it's still the visual of it, of Tommy pushing his girlfriend to stay on this hospital bed.
Yeah, maybe overshot the mark a little bit on that one. The other thing that's interesting, and I know this has come up a lot in kind of fan discussions, because with Jason, Zach, and Trini, we had all that business with the Sword of Power. It was a whole process in order to transfer the power, as the title suggests. Here, though, Kimberly just hands Kat the coin, and you see some like energy transfer, and that's it.
Think like lightning sizzling goes from one hand to the other. So okay, cool.
I'll say two things. Number one, see, my head canon, and you don't even need this because I think there are other explanations, but my head canon was always, well, they have the Sword of Power now, right? It's in the command center. Maybe they've sort of integrated it into the command center infrastructure in some way, shape, or form. So even though we're not seeing it, maybe it's still doing its thing. Alternatively, though, and I think this is probably the more common theory, is like they have different powers now, right? It's not those original powers that needed the sword to be transferred. Now it's these ninja powers that presumably operate a little bit differently. And then that comic book miniseries we read actually acknowledges the fact that since the Sword of Power was not used, Kimberly still had some latent energy that Zordon could, amp up and allow her to morph again, at least temporarily. So I did appreciate that comic addressed it. But,
Yeah.
this didn't trip me up too much that we didn't go through the whole sword business.
Yeah, when you mention I don't remember the sword as far as the show goes, but obviously they did use it for those purposes in the comic book, follow up on Kim. So yeah, it was interesting with the comic. Like, yeah, I liked it enough, but also it's just like, oh, we're gonna see what happened to Kim after she left the Power Rangers. Well, she was at the games, and then she goes to check on her family, and something's wrong. They're missing. No one's in a village, and then she immediately becomes a Power Ranger again. It's like, okay, so it's like a different. She has a different suit because there's still an existing Pink Ranger out there along with the rest of the real team. But it's basically a new Power Ranger adventure, and it becomes full on one as the story goes on. So it didn't, it could have just been another Power Ranger story with the real team, but it was just they sort of incorporated her, and they show her for to a degree being on her own and handling herself and taking the lead, so that's different about it. But still, it's just like I thought, oh, now we're gonna learn where her story went, and it just right back to Zordon and getting power and sharing power, and it was fine for what it was. I think a little bit I had a hard time with it because I don't know if it's that Boom doesn't have like full rights of their likenesses, or it's just they choose to draw them in their own styled way. But she doesn't especially look like Amy Jo Johnson. She looks like just girl with brown hair, and you kind of have to fill in the rest of the details. So like all the characters, you could see semi resemblance, but it's not like they're trying to replicate their exact appearance. So I wasn't sure if that's just like they have to do that or they just chose, not to.
I know that's a good question. I'm not positive, but as far as the story, I had a similar reaction to you. Like I thought it was enjoyable and it was cool to see Kim, kind of in the center. But yeah, I guess like yourself, you went into it. It's like, oh man, like what was her post Ranger life like? And it's like, oh okay, like she just instantly became a Ranger. There's this whole business with Goldar and this new monster, and they're, turning the people of the small French village where Kimberly's mother and stepfather now live into monsters. And so Kimberly, one thing that I did like that she called on Trini and Zach, who we find out are in a relationship, for help. And so they join the fray, and then two of the villagers temporarily become rangers. So there's this, new team, and we ultimately, by the time we get to the end, it picks up a year later, and we sense, spoiler alert, folks, but the comic has been out for a while now. But we see Kim's writing that Dear John letter that she'll send to Tommy. So there were aspects of it that I appreciated. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I was necessarily expecting per se,
No,
but
yeah, me either. But yeah, like I agree with you on that. It was seeing cool that she reaches out to them, so you see what they were up to. Because obviously, with them being actors that were no longer on the show, and they didn't have a planned ending that was told as a story, they were just, gone until whenever, I guess, Jason came back down the line and, as the Gold Ranger and Zeo and Forever Red and whatever. But it was kind of, that was the last of them. I mean, obviously tomorrow we're going to see Zach for the first time, I think, since they left, right? He
Yep.
hasn't been involved at all.
Yeah, he has not
Um,
come back.
and, Toy Trang, rest in peace. But but yeah, so it was cool to see them brought into the fray, and she connects with them, and you see what they were doing on whatever their mission in, that they were pulled from being able to be Rangers in the story were. And then, it was interesting to see that, they became a couple. I mean, maybe it was just naturally, evolved from that they're working on this thing together. Because you would, from the show itself, you would have always thought maybe her and Billy would have gotten together, because there was always that connection where, they were both kind of the smarter ones, and sometimes she would be like the one to translate his techno babble for the rest of the team. Um, I don't know if I ever told you about this. I'm pretty sure you haven't seen them, but in high school, in Spanish class, like I I always like to do, instead of like writing a paper or something, when I had the chance, I like to do, videos, making like little, movies. And I actually ended up doing two of them. We did Power Rangers. Me and some of my friends, we filmed the Power Rangers thing. And like one of my friends who was, essentially, the Trini role, she's not Asian, but she was just filling the Yellow Ranger slot. Basically, like literally, I had her function was purely to be Billy's trance. I actually was Billy. So I put on glasses and I was being like over the top nerdy, and it was fun. Um, but yeah, so that's what I did. I'll have to show you those
Yeah,
sometime.
no, that would be cool to see for sure. But
Yeah, Guarda Bosques de la Potencia de Morphin Poderosa, I think was what how it translated.
nice.
Really silly stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we read the comic at least, and it was cool to fill in a little bit of that. And yeah, I mean, I have to say overall, I thought this was overall, I would say a solid arc. And again, there's other business going on too, like the new Zords and all of that. But I mean, really introducing Kat, segueing Kim out of the show, and again, it was just looking at the seasons that I watched, at least the three Mighty Morphin and Zeo. It's like this was the only instance where you got this kind of farewell. According to IMDb trivia, I don't know if this has ever been verified, but allegedly Amy Jo Johnson filmed a few scenes of of Kimberly like checking in or calling the Rangers that were meant to be used in subsequent episodes that for whatever reason never were. So I don't have more information on that other than what I literally read
Oh
on
man.
IMDb trivia. But again, I don't think it would have been anything that substantial. But it was just interesting if that were the case, if they had that. I'd be curious why not sprinkle those in here and there. I don't know.
That would have been cool, or if they came as like deleted scenes down the road or anything. I have, years back, I bought the Mighty Morphin DVD box set, and there was some good sale, and I got the whole thing. So it has like all three seasons, and I think it even has Alien
Yes.
Rangers. So yeah, I think there's supposed to be some good bonus features. It's again, I have these DVDs, and sometimes I just never get them. I think when I first showed it to my daughter, I think I might have started with the DVDs, but then I found it was on Netflix, and it's just much more convenient. Um,
The DVD has a lot of cool stuff. Like just as one example, one thing that we'll be talking about in a future episode, it has the stage show, the live show that they did. There's a recording of that on there. So there's a lot of cool stuff. But yeah, the Amy Jo Johnson thing that was kind of curious. But in any event, I think they did I think they did a good job. It's interesting too. It's like another instance of like what reason can we give for why the Ranger has to leave? And it's like something global, something international. It's like hard hard to argue with,
yeah,
and
it can't be
also
local. Yeah, if it's local, they can maybe manage to balance it out. But no, if they're having to be across the world, no can do.
yeah, it's like in a fan fiction scenario, right, where it would have been interesting. We had the first three leave for the International Peace Conference. Then Kim goes for these pan global games. If Billy had been given a proper exit and something similarly, some sort of global scientific conference or
Science,
something like that,
yeah.
it's like then you have the five originals right? Like scattered across the world, and then they can become a a special team. I know the comics did a whole thing with the Omega Rangers with Jason, Zach, and Trini and all of that, but I was just kind of thinking about like in piece by piece, the original team like ending up outside the country.
Would you say overall? I mean, I heard the part one and part two. So would you say in overall that it's worth really checking out? Like it's really like the comics are like really good and worth checking out overall.
I would. Again, I think like not to knock this Pink Ranger miniseries. I don't think this rises to the level of what I've read so far from the main line Mighty Morphin stuff that Kyle Higgins wrote at the beginning. We
Mm.
will be covering Shattered Grid not too long from now, so I'm excited to get into that. I'll say certainly just at least from the first couple of years of the Boom comics that I read, they are worth it because it's a lot of these things that you and I in this episode and my guest and I in other episodes have been like, oh, like I wonder this, I wonder that, like why do they talk about this? A lot of those things like you get to see kind of play out, so it's fun in that sense.
Have they at all said if it's supposed to be considered like canon, like between the episodes, or is it just like this is a divergent thing where things kind of go differently and it's its own thing?
I mean, I'm not 100% sure. I think it's meant to be like you can read it and kind of have it fit in, but as far as I don't know, like Saban officially recognizing it as the I don't know. I'm not positive. I don't
Okay.
think so per se, but
Oh, and we should also mention, it was announced that Amy Jo Johnson's going to be writing a comic that's like, her take on things. So that's kind of exciting because, people were bummed when, it seems at least by, what she's said publicly that she's not involved in the special tomorrow. But this is going to be kind of her contribution to the anniversary celebration and just, the fandom, as a whole. Because, I saw people some negative comment. You're always going to see negative comments online. Some people like oh, she thinks she's too good for it or she's better than. But like, yeah, no, that's clearly not the case. She had the cameo in the reboot, and when she was trying to raise money for her movie, she actually put on a Pink Ranger suit and was like busking, like with her guitar, just playing, and singing songs in Toronto, and so she clearly has attachment, and she's openly admitted, her gratitude for it. It launched her career, and she. I don't think she takes that for granted. Obviously, the pay, we all know they were like paid peanuts, and there was no union stuff. And I read stuff. They say like there were a few times that she could have almost died because of like the way that it wasn't handled well, but like stunts and things where she was almost set on fire or electrocuted. So I'm sure she, she has reasons to feel mixed about it. But I think all that said, still, oh yeah, she wrote the introduction to the trade version, which is what I picked up of the Pink. I don't know if you see that, or was it you just read individual issues and
yeah, I
didn't
just read the
include it?
individual ones digitally, so yeah, I didn't see that.
Okay, yeah, I ordered it on Amazon on Prime, and I got it fast, and I just read through it. And she has a nice introduction, so she's obviously still grateful, and she's not forsaking it and stuff. For me personally, it would have been amazing to see her in this special, and it would have been even better if they got as much of the original cast as possible. Obviously, Toy Trang died, in 2001, so she's out of the picture. But they're addressing that with having this daughter character, take up the reign and avenge her. But if it was like the daughter and the other five originals, that would have been just amazing. That I would have gotten super excited for that. Like I'm looking forward to it and seeing Zach Bax and Billy, and how they're addressing the situation with Trini. Like I'm fascinated to see how it's gonna go, and I'm interested and I'm a bit excited, but like that would have just been the icing on the cake if it could have been all. I mean, obviously now Austin St. John's got like legal troubles too, but and
Yeah.
obviously and we lost Jason David Frank, but he was it was filming while he was still around, but yeah, is
No,
a
I know.
shame, but and that's a great loss. I don't have the fondness and connection for him like you do, obviously, but I understand and appreciate his role within the show, and then the greater presentation and representation of the show outside and cons and stuff. Like, I mean, man, it just shows you never know. Like, people say with like Robin Williams, he was this funny, goofy guy outwardly, and then he had his struggles, and that, Jason David Frank, he was just like a ball of positivity. He was, posing with little kids dressed up like, his characters, and, just, so involved. Like I don't know if I heard this first or I just said it. I said he's like the mayor of Power Rangers. Like, he's the guy. He was. And to lose him in that way, it's just tragic. I mean, if you're having trouble, listeners, reach out to someone, talk to someone. It's worth living for. And yeah, it's a huge loss. So I could appreciate that even without being like so fondly connected to him in his role. But I mean, obviously he was there in the stuff I watched, and he was, he was leader for a good, portion. And yeah, just it sucks.
No,
not to end on a downer note, but I mean, if you're planning on it sounds like you're kind of wrapping things up, but yeah. So I'm looking forward to the special either way. Are you here? I gotta know this. So I know you stayed up for the Snyder Cut. Are you staying up tonight to watch the special?
No, I think I'll wait till tomorrow. It's all right.
Okay.
It's all right.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I don't know that I have another 3 a.m. viewing, if that's the time on the East Coast that it's dropping. So.
I looked it up, and so yeah, that's how they typically do these drops, because it's like midnight. Pacific.
I mean, I could try to knock out a morning one. That's a possibility, but I'll probably just wait till tomorrow night. But it will mean, essentially staying off social media, Twitter in particular, because I don't want to, I don't want to have anything spoiled. We've seen the trailers and all, but in any event, by the time this comes out, people will have already heard a discussion on Once and Always. But I am glad you mentioned the Amy Jo Johnson Pink Ranger comic. I'm excited for that. I'm very curious. We'll be keeping an eye on that. Zach, I thank you very much for coming on, watching these 9 episodes, reading the comic. I appreciate it. It was great to have this conversation with you. If anyone wants to follow you on Twitter, where would you like to send them?
Twitter. I'm just Zach Woliner, ZACH. Woliner. Oh, that's another thing that reminded me. I just was looking at clips again, like from the first episode, and Zordon calls him Zachary when he's describing what power he's going to have, and like he just goes by Zach. Like, how does he know? I mean, for me, it was personally cool because I'm a Zachary, so it was cool to see that Zach was a Zachary, and like also, I mentioned my older brother Jason back when it started. It's like, oh, there's a Zach and a Jason. It was cool. I thought, oh, if only they had a Harry. And I even remember, in my imagination coming up with like an Orange Ranger named Harry that would have all 3. There's never been one, has there, right? In all 30 years, from what I understand?
Yeah, I'm not, my knowledge once we get past Zio is spotty. So I couldn't say with certainty, but I don't think so.
I think I saw something recently where like, oh, are they going to finally have an Orange Ranger, where there was something that came out or something at, some cast of the upcoming season, and there was some hint that there was going to be an Orange Ranger. But anyways, get back to what I was saying. Yes, ZACH, and my last name is Woliner, WOLINER. I'm on Twitter. I'm on TikTok. I discovered that a few years ago, and I have a lot of fun on there. That's been positive overall. And if you want to book a puppet/magic show, you could look up Zany Zach. On Twitter is Zany Zach JJMMPP for Zany Zach, the Jolly Jesters, Magical Mayhem, and Puppet Pandemonium. And I guess those are the big ones, really.
Right on. Well, thank you.
But yeah. Oh yeah. I was just gonna say, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. This was a lot of fun. I have so many more notes that we didn't get to. I took way too many notes, but I'm glad I hit some of the points that I meant to. But I just wanted to be prepared. So just as things were happening, I was like jotting down the action, and then occasionally some of these little observations that I made, along the way of just like these funny, questionable sometimes things. But it's great to chat with you. And again, we haven't really talked in a while, so it's nice catching up with you in general. I really appreciate this, and I look forward to sharing the final episode. So thanks so much.
Oh no, thank you so much. And fun fact, audience, I made a documentary film about Zach a few years ago. It's called Wacky Man: The Rise of a Puppeteer, about Zach's pursuits in the field of puppetry with his creation, Wally Wackerman and other puppets. And you can watch it for free on YouTube. So wackyman.com, Wacky Man, The Rise of a Puppeteer. It's on the Anthony Desiato YouTube channel. So I hope you'll check it out. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, audience. We will be back in 2 weeks with our next all new episode. And of course, once a Ranger fan, always a Ranger fan. This show is part of the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network, home to Digging for Kryptonite, another exciting episode in the adventures of Superman, Summoning the Zords, and My Comic Shop History, available wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review today. Sign up at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato for additional content. Thank you all.